10 mind traps that secretly control your life. Welcome to MT. We all make decisions that we look back on and regret. You might ask yourself how you could have been so foolish or so blind. The truth is that our brains are not perfect computers, and they have glitches. These mental glitches are psychological traps that cause us to think in strange and irrational ways. Understanding them is the key to making better choices with your money, your career, and your life. Today, we are going to explore 10 of the most powerful traps that secretly control your daily decisions. 1. The unfinished task trap. Have you ever had a song stuck in your head that you just could not get rid of? It plays on a loop over and over, and the only way to make it stop is to listen to the entire song. This annoying experience is a perfect example of a powerful psychological trap. It is known as the jargon effect, or what we can call the unfinished task trap. The core idea is simple, but it has huge effects on our lives. Incomplete or interrupted tasks stick in our consciousness and demand our attention. Our brain hates open loops, and it will constantly remind us that something is left undone. It is like having a little alarm clock in your head that keeps going off, reminding you of that one thing you started but did not finish. This mental quirk was first noticed by a Russian psychologist named Bluma Zygarnik in the 1920s. She was sitting in a busy restaurant in Vienna, and she noticed something incredible about her waiter. The waiter could remember a huge number of complicated orders from many different tables without writing anything down. He remembered who wanted extra sauce, who wanted no onions, and who had a special drink order, all perfectly. Zygarnik was impressed by his amazing memory. But later, after she and her friends had paid and left, she realized she had forgotten her scarf. She went back into the restaurant, found the same waiter, and asked him if he had seen it. The waiter stared at her with a completely blank expression, as if he had never seen her before in his life. He had no memory of her, her friends, or what table they had sat at. When she seemed surprised, he explained his system. He said he keeps every single order in his head perfectly, but only until the moment the bill is paid. Once the task is complete, his brain deletes the information to make room for new orders. This is the Zygarnik effect in action. Our brains are incredibly efficient at holding onto information about unfinished business, but as soon as a task is marked as complete in our minds, the information is wiped clean. You have probably experienced this yourself without even realizing it. Think about studying for a big exam in school or college. You spend weeks cramming information into your brain, memorizing facts, formulas, and dates. On the day of the test, it is all there, ready for you to use. But the moment you hand in your exam paper and walk out of the room, what happens? Most of that information vanishes almost instantly. Your brain understands that the task is finished, so it discards the data it no longer believes it needs. This is good because it frees up mental space, but it also highlights the problem with the tasks that are not finished. Every unfinished task, no matter how small, takes up a piece of your mental real estate. That email you need to reply to, the laundry you need to fold, the phone call you have been putting off. Each one of these is an open loop in your mind. Even when you are trying to focus on something else, a part of your brain is still occupied by these nagging, incomplete jobs. This creates a constant, low level of stress and anxiety. It drains your energy and makes it harder to concentrate on the present moment. You might feel scattered, overwhelmed, or unable to relax. And it could be because your mind is secretly juggling a dozen unfinished tasks in the background. It is like trying to run a computer with too many programs open at once. Eventually, everything slows down and starts to crash. The good news is that you do not actually have to complete a task to close the loop in your brain. Further research showed that you just need to have a clear and concrete plan of action. As long as your brain knows that the task is accounted for and there is a plan to handle it, it can let go and stop nagging you. This is where simple tools can become incredibly powerful. The first and most important tool is a to-do list. Get a small notepad or use an app on your phone, and every time you remember something you need to do, write it down immediately. Do not just write down the task, also jot down a quick note about how and when you plan to tackle it. For example, instead of just writing "call the doctor," write "call the doctor tomorrow at 9 a.m. during my coffee break." This simple act of making a plan signals to your brain that the situation is under control. The mental alarm clock can finally be turned off, and you can bring your focus back to what you are doing right now. the second tool is the power of checking things off. At the end of a productive day, take a moment to look at your to-do list and physically check off or cross out everything you accomplished. This provides a powerful feeling of completion and closure. It is like telling your brain, "This file is closed, you can archive it now." This simple ritual can make you feel a huge sense of relief, as if a weight has been lifted from your shoulders. It can boost your energy, improve your mood, and even help you sleep better because your mind is no longer racing with unfinished business. A third practical tip is to change how you handle your digital life, especially emails. Many of us have a bad habit of reading an email as soon as it arrives, even if we do not have time to respond. We tell ourselves we will deal with it later, but by opening it, we have created an open loop. That email will now sit in the back of your mind, consuming mental energy until you finally respond to it. A better approach is to only open your email when you have a block of time set aside to actually read and respond. If you are not going to deal with it right away, do not even look at it. This prevents the unfinished task trap from activating and allows you to maintain your focus on more important things. By understanding this trap, you can take back control of your mental energy. You can clear the clutter from your mind, reduce your stress levels, and become more present and effective in your daily life. It all starts with recognizing those open loops and having a simple system to close them. 2. The deceptive average trap. Imagine you are planning to walk across a river and someone tells you that the average depth of the river is only 3 feet. That sounds perfectly safe, right? You would probably start walking across without a second thought. But what if the river is 1 foot deep for most of the way, and then suddenly has a 20-foot deep hole in the middle? The average depth might still be 3 feet, but you would be in serious trouble. This is the deceptive average trap, also known as the illusion of averages. It is one of the most common and dangerous mental traps because it uses a seemingly helpful piece of information, the average, to hide a much more complicated and often risky reality. An average is a single number that is supposed to represent a whole group of numbers. To get it, you add everything up and then divide by how many things there are. It sounds simple and scientific, which is why we trust it so much. But an average can be a liar, and it can lead to terrible decisions in almost every area of your life. Let's look at a classic example from the world of finance. Imagine you are on the board of a company, and the chief executive officer proudly reports that the average salary of an employee is $100,000 a year. This sounds fantastic. It makes it seem like the company is very generous and that all its workers are well paid. But let's look closer at the numbers. It turns out the company has 10 employees. The chief executive officer pays himself a salary of $640,000 a year. The other 9 employees each make only $40,000 a year. If you add up all those salaries and divide by 10, you get an average of exactly $100,000. The number is technically correct, but it paints a completely false picture. It hides the massive inequality within the company. If you were a potential employee who only heard the average, you would be tricked into thinking you were going to make a lot of money. The average is deceptive because it is easily distorted by outliers, which are numbers that are way higher or way lower than the rest of the group. In our example, the chief executive officer's huge salary is an outlier that pulls the entire average way up. Let's take another example to really drive this home. Imagine you and your 2 friends are sitting in a car. You make $60,000 a year, one friend makes $40,000, and the other makes $80,000. The average salary in the car is $60,000, which feels pretty representative of the group. Now, imagine you stop to pick up a 4th person, and that person happens to be a multi-billionaire like Jeff Bezos. What happens to the average salary in the car now? It skyrockets to hundreds of millions of dollars. Suddenly, the average says that everyone in the car is incredibly wealthy, which is obviously not true for 3 of the 4 people. This shows how a single extreme outlier can make the average completely meaningless. This trap is not just about money. It affects how we understand health, education, and even the news. You might hear a news report that the average response time for an ambulance in your city is 8 minutes. That might make you feel safe. But what if that average is hiding the fact that in wealthy neighborhoods, the response time is 2 minutes, while in poor neighborhoods, it is 14 minutes? The average hides a life or death difference. You might read that the average student at a certain school gets good test scores. But this could hide the reality that a small group of genius students are getting perfect scores, while a large number of students are actually failing and not getting the help they need. The average makes the school look good, but it ignores the struggles of many of its students. So, how can you protect yourself from this deceptive trap? The solution is to become a more critical thinker and to always ask for more information than just the average. The first thing you should always ask for is the range. The range is the difference between the highest value and the lowest value in the group. In our company salary example, the range is huge, from $40,000 to $640,000. Knowing the range immediately tells you that the average is not telling the whole story. The second thing you should ask for is the median. The median is a different kind of average that is often much more honest. Instead of adding everything up and dividing, the median is simply the middle number when you line up all the values from smallest to largest. In our company salary example, if you line up the salaries, 9 of them are $40,000 and 1 is $640,000. The middle value, the median, would be $40,000. This number gives you a much more accurate picture of what a typical employee actually earns. The average was $100,000, but the median was $40,000. That is a massive difference in understanding. When you hear a claim that relies on an average, you need to develop a healthy sense of suspicion. Ask yourself, who is in this group being averaged? Are there likely to be extreme outliers that are skewing the number? Could this average be hiding something important? For example, if an investment fund tells you it has had an average return of 10% per year for the last decade, you should be careful. It is possible that it had a few spectacular years with 50% returns and many other years where it actually lost money. The average looks good, but the journey to get there could have been a wild and risky ride that you are not prepared for. By being aware of the deceptive average trap, you can start to see the world more clearly. You will be less likely to be fooled by misleading statistics from companies, politicians, or the media. You will make better decisions because you will demand a fuller, more honest picture of reality instead of settling for a single, simple, and often dangerously deceptive number. 3. The fake expert trap. There is a famous story about the brilliant physicist Max Planck, who won the Nobel Prize for his groundbreaking work in quantum mechanics. After winning the prize, he went on a tour all across Germany, giving the same lecture over and over again to audiences of important people. He was accompanied on this tour by his chauffeur, who drove him from city to city. After hearing the same lecture dozens of times, the chauffeur had memorized it word for word. One day, he made a clever suggestion to the professor. He said, "Professor Planck, it must be so boring for you to give the exact same speech every single time. How about tonight in Munich? We switch places, I will give the lecture, and you can sit in the front row wearing my chauffeur's cap to have a little fun." Planck was amused by the idea and agreed. That evening, the chauffeur stood at the podium and delivered a flawless, long lecture on quantum mechanics to a room full of distinguished experts. He was so convincing that no one suspected a thing. But then, during the question and answer session at the end, a physics professor from the audience stood up and asked a very difficult technical question. The chauffeur, of course, had no idea how to answer it. But without missing a beat, he showed his cleverness again. He looked at the professor and said, "I am truly surprised that in a modern and advanced city like Munich, someone would ask such a fundamentally simple question. In fact, it is so simple that I am going to let my chauffeur answer it for me." He then gestured to the real Professor Planck in the front row, who stood up and answered the question perfectly. This story perfectly illustrates the difference between two types of knowledge. There is real, hard-earned knowledge, which is what Professor Planck had. And then there is what we can call chauffeur knowledge, which is what the driver had. Chauffeur knowledge is the knowledge of someone who has learned to put on a good show. They can talk the talk, use the right buzzwords, and appear confident and articulate. They might have a great voice, look very professional, or have a charismatic personality. But underneath the surface, they do not truly understand what they are talking about. They are just repeating information they have heard from others without any deep comprehension. In today's world, we are drowning in chauffeur knowledge. The internet and social media have made it easier than ever for people to present themselves as experts on any topic imaginable. We see influencers giving complex financial advice, life coaches promising to solve all our problems, and self-proclaimed gurus selling miracle health cures. Many of these people are masters of chauffeur knowledge. They are excellent at marketing themselves and creating a convincing performance. This makes it increasingly difficult for us to tell the difference between a real expert and a fake one. We are naturally drawn to people who are confident and entertaining, even if the information they are sharing is shallow, incorrect, or even dangerous. This is a huge problem because we rely on experts to guide us in making important decisions. We need to know who to trust when it comes to our health, our finances, and our careers. Falling for the fake expert trap can have serious consequences. You could lose your life savings by following bad investment advice from a charismatic YouTuber. You could damage your health by trying a trendy diet promoted by an influencer with no medical background. You could hire the wrong person for a critical job in your company because they gave a great interview but lacked the actual skills to do the work. So, how can you protect yourself from the fake expert trap? You need to learn how to spot the difference between real knowledge and chauffeur knowledge. The first and most important sign of a true expert is that they understand the limits of their own knowledge. A true expert is not afraid to say, "I do not know." They are comfortable with the boundaries of their circle of competence. This is the area of knowledge that they have studied deeply and have real-world experience in. When a question falls outside of this circle, they will honestly admit it rather than trying to bluff their way through an answer. A person with chauffeur knowledge, on the other hand, often has an answer for everything. They speak with absolute certainty on a wide range of topics because their knowledge is a mile wide and an inch deep. They have collected talking points from all over the place, and they are not afraid to use them. So, when you are evaluating someone's expertise, pay close attention to how they handle questions at the edge of their supposed field. If they confidently have an answer for absolutely everything, you should be very suspicious. The second way to spot a fake expert is to look for their track record, not just their words. Someone can talk beautifully about building a successful business, but have they actually ever built one? Someone can give you a long list of stock picks, but what does their own investment portfolio look like over the last decade? Real experts have results to back up their claims. People with chauffeur knowledge only have the performance. When you are looking to hire someone, do not just be impressed by their charming personality and their polished resume. Give them a practical test that requires them to demonstrate their skills. If you are hiring a computer programmer, have them write some code. If you are hiring a writer, have them write a sample article. This cuts through the chauffeur knowledge and reveals their true level of competence. Finally, you must also be careful not to become a source of chauffeur knowledge yourself. It is very easy to hear an interesting fact, read a catchy headline, or watch a compelling video, and then feel the urge to share that information with others as if it were your own expertise. We do this all the time with new diet fads, political opinions, or sensational news stories. Before you share information, ask yourself, is this within my own circle of competence? Do I truly understand this topic deeply, or am I just repeating something I heard? It is okay not to have an opinion on everything. In fact, it is a sign of wisdom to know what you know and to know what you do not know. By being aware of the fake expert trap, you can navigate the modern world of information much more safely. Learn to distinguish the real substance from the polished show, and you will make far better decisions and protect yourself from those who are only pretending to know. 4. The just do something trap. Let's talk about the most popular sport in the world, football or soccer as it is known in some countries. Imagine a critical moment in a game, a penalty kick. It is a dramatic showdown between a single player and the goalkeeper. The ball is placed just 12 yards from the goal, and the player is about to kick it with all their might. The ball travels so fast that it reaches the goal in less than 0.3 of a second. That is faster than the blink of an eye. For the goalkeeper, 0.3 of a second is not nearly enough time to see which way the ball is going and then react. They have to make their decision to dive left, right, or stay in the middle at virtually the same time the ball is kicked. It is basically a guess. Researchers have studied thousands of penalty kicks, and they found something fascinating. Roughly 1/3 of the kicks go to the left, 1/3 go to the right, and 1/3 go down the middle. This means that from a purely statistical point of view, the goalkeeper has the same chance of saving the ball whether they dive left, dive right, or simply stay standing in the center of the goal. But what do we almost always see the goalkeeper do? They dive. They hurl their body dramatically to one side or the other. Why do they do this, even when staying still is just as effective an option? They do it because of a powerful psychological trap called the action bias. The action bias is our deep-seated tendency to feel that we must take action, any action, especially when we are in a new or uncertain situation. We would rather do something, even if it is pointless or counterproductive, than do nothing at all. Sitting still and waiting feels passive, lazy, and wrong. Taking action, on the other hand, feels proactive, decisive, and impressive. For the goalkeeper, diving to the wrong side and missing the ball looks much better than standing still in the middle as the ball flies past them. If they dive, at least it looks like they tried their best. If they stand still, they might be criticized by their teammates, their coach, and the fans for not doing anything. They feel a huge social and internal pressure to act, even if that action has no logical advantage. This bias is not just on the football field, it is everywhere in our lives. Think about the world of investing. Imagine the stock market has a bad day and the value of your investments drops by 5%. Your gut reaction might be a surge of panic and an overwhelming urge to do something, anything. You feel compelled to sell all your stocks to stop the bleeding, or maybe to buy more stocks because they are now on sale. The idea of just sitting back, doing nothing, and waiting for the market to recover can feel almost impossible. Yet, for most long-term investors, doing nothing during a short-term downturn is often the single best course of action. Frantically buying and selling based on fear is a proven way to lose money. But the action bias pushes us to act, often to our own financial detriment. We see this trap in medicine as well. Imagine you go to the doctor because you have been feeling sick for a few days, but your symptoms are vague and unclear. The doctor runs some tests, but is not sure what is wrong. What would you prefer the doctor to do? Would you rather they say, "I am not sure what this is yet. Let's wait a few days and see how your symptoms develop before we do anything"? Or would you rather they immediately prescribe you some medication, like an antibiotic, just in case? Most patients would feel much better if the doctor did something. We want a prescription, a procedure, a plan of action. The idea of a doctor telling us to just wait and see can feel like they are not taking our problem seriously. This pressure from patients can lead doctors to overprescribe medication, even when they know it might not be necessary or could have negative side effects. The action bias tells us that doing something is better than doing nothing, even when evidence suggests otherwise. This bias might be rooted in our evolutionary past. For our ancient ancestors, in the face of a threat like a predator, taking immediate action was almost always the right call. The person who quickly ran away or threw a spear survived, while the person who stood still to carefully assess the situation was more likely to become lunch. In that environment, a bias toward quick, decisive action was a survival advantage. But in our modern, complex world, this same instinct often gets us into trouble. Our biggest challenges today are not usually predators in the grass, but complex problems like financial planning, career decisions, or managing chronic health conditions. These problems often benefit from careful thought, patience, and strategic inaction. So, how can you overcome the powerful pull of the action bias? The first step is to simply be aware of it. When you feel that frantic urge to do something in a high-stakes or uncertain situation, pause for a moment. Take a deep breath and ask yourself, is this action truly necessary and helpful right now? Or am I just acting because I feel anxious and want to feel like I am in control? Recognize that the feeling of needing to act might just be the bias talking. The second step is to consciously consider inaction as a valid and powerful choice. In many situations, waiting for more information, letting things calm down, or allowing a problem to resolve on its own is the wisest move. You do not have to act immediately just to relieve the discomfort of uncertainty. For example, if you receive a provocative or angry email at work, your action bias will scream at you to fire back an equally angry reply immediately. A much better strategy is to do nothing. Wait 24 hours. After you have calmed down and thought about the situation, you can write a much more professional and effective response. In this case, inaction is the best action. When you are making a big decision, like choosing between 2 job offers or 2 investment opportunities, and neither of them feels quite right, do not force yourself to choose one. It is okay to choose neither. Holding back and waiting for a better third option to appear is a perfectly valid strategy. Resist the urge to act just for the sake of acting. By learning to recognize and resist the action bias, you will become a more patient and strategic thinker. You will save yourself from making impulsive decisions that you later regret. You will learn the profound wisdom in knowing when to act, and just as importantly, when to embrace the power of doing nothing at all. 5. The "it's not my fault" trap. I want you to take a moment and think back to 2 different events from your past. First, I want you to remember a time when you were really successful at something. It could be a test you aced in school, a major project you led at work that was a huge success, or a personal goal you finally achieved. Think about how that felt and why you believe you succeeded. Now, I want you to remember a time that was the complete opposite. Think about a situation where you failed. It could be a test you bombed, a job interview that went terribly, or a business idea that fell flat. Think about that situation and why you believe you failed. If you are like most people, your thinking about these 2 events will be very different. For your success, you probably gave yourself all the credit. You might have thought, "I succeeded because I worked so hard," or "I got that A because I am smart," or "My project was a success because of my great leadership skills." When things go well, we tend to attribute it to our own internal qualities like our talent, our effort, and our character. But what about your failure? Your explanation was probably very different. You likely blamed external factors. You might have thought, "I failed that test because the questions were unfair," or "I did not get the job because the interviewer was biased against me," or "My business failed because the economy was bad." When things go wrong, we have a powerful tendency to blame the outside world, other people, or just bad luck. This is a classic psychological trap known as the self-serving bias. It is a powerful shield that we use to protect our ego. The bias works in 2 ways. It makes us take personal credit for our successes, which makes us feel good about ourselves. And it makes us deflect blame for our failures, which protects us from feeling bad about ourselves. On the surface, this might seem like a harmless or even helpful mental habit. It can help maintain our self-esteem and keep us feeling confident. But in the long run, the self-serving bias is incredibly destructive because it prevents us from learning from our mistakes. If you are never responsible for your failures, then you have no reason to change your behavior. If your business failed only because of the economy, then you will not analyze the real mistakes you made in your business plan, your marketing, or your customer service. As a result, you are doomed to repeat those same mistakes in your next venture. The self-serving bias puts you in the passenger seat of your own life. It creates a reality where you are not in control of the negative outcomes. And if you are not in control, you are powerless to make things better. This bias shows up everywhere. If a student gets a good grade, they praise their own intelligence. If they get a bad grade, they blame the teacher for being a bad instructor. If an athlete wins a game, they credit their own skill. If they lose, they blame the referees for making bad calls. In our relationships, this bias can be particularly damaging. If your marriage is going well, you might think it is because you are such a great, loving, and supportive partner. If your marriage is struggling, you will quickly point to all the things your partner is doing wrong. You will tell yourself, "The problem is that my partner is not contributing their fair share," or "They are not listening to me." It is always their fault. This kind of thinking makes it impossible to solve relationship problems because you are refusing to look at your own contribution to the conflict. You are waiting for the other person to change instead of taking responsibility for your own actions and attitudes. So, how can you fight against this deeply ingrained and ego-protecting bias? The first step is to seek out and value honest feedback. We all have that one friend who is maybe a little too honest sometimes, the one who will gently but firmly tell you the truth, even when you do not want to hear it. You need to keep that person close. There is a big difference between an honest friend and a toxic person. A toxic person will criticize you to make themselves feel better, often by projecting their own flaws onto you. But an honest person has your best interests at heart. They will deliver their feedback with care, but they will not sugarcoat the truth to protect your ego. Listening to these people is like having a mirror that shows you your blind spots. The second and more difficult step is to practice radical accountability. This means making a conscious effort to find your own contribution to every negative situation in your life. Even if you believe you are only 1% responsible for a problem, you need to find that 1% and own it completely. When a project fails at work, do not just blame your lazy teammates. Ask yourself, how could I have communicated better? What could I have done differently to motivate the team? When you have an argument with your partner, do not just list their faults. Ask yourself, how did my words or actions make the situation worse? What was my 1%? This is not about beating yourself up or taking the blame for everything. It is about shifting your mindset from that of a victim to that of a creator. Victims believe that life happens to them. Creators believe that they happen to life. By holding yourself accountable, you take back your power. If you contributed to the problem, that means you have the power to contribute to the end solution. You can learn from your mistakes, adjust your approach, and create a better outcome next time. The self-serving bias is a comfortable lie. It whispers in your ear that you are great when you win and that it is not your fault when you lose. But breaking free from this lie is the only way to truly grow, improve, and take control of your own destiny. It requires humility, courage, and a willingness to face uncomfortable truths about yourself. But the reward is genuine self-improvement and the power to build a better life. 6. The fear of missing out trap. I once had a friend who seemed to be living a life of organized chaos. In the morning, she was a yoga instructor. In the afternoon, she worked as a receptionist at a medical clinic. And in the evenings and on weekends, she was a freelance writer, creating articles for various blogs. She was constantly busy, running from one job to the next. One day, she told me she was thinking about taking on yet another gig, this time working at a local gym on the weekends. I was shocked. I gently asked if she was having financial trouble, thinking that was the only possible reason someone would work so much. But the issue was not money at all. After we talked for a while, the real problem became clear. She was absolutely terrified of closing any doors. She explained her thinking to me. She said, "What if I quit teaching yoga?" And then in a few months, I realized that yoga was my one true passion in life. What if I give up my writing, only to find out that I missed my chance to become a famous author? She was not worried about paying her bills. She was paralyzed by the idea of making a choice, because making a choice for one thing meant giving up on the possibility of 1,000 other things. By trying to do everything, she kept all her options open. This is a powerful psychological trap that has become even more common in our modern world. We can call it the inability to close doors, and it is fueled by a powerful fear of missing out, or FOMO. We are surrounded by what seems like an infinite number of choices for our careers, our hobbies, our relationships, and even what to watch on television. Having options feels great. It makes us feel powerful and in control. But there is a dark side to having too many options. The problem is that when you refuse to choose, you end up diluting your efforts. You spread your time, your energy, and your focus so thin that you cannot do anything properly. My friend was not able to dedicate herself fully to any of her 3 jobs. She was a decent yoga teacher, an okay receptionist, and a mediocre writer. Because she only gave each job a small fraction of her attention, she never had the chance to become truly great at any of them. She was trapped in a state of permanent mediocrity, all because she was afraid to commit. There is a saying that there are no free options in life. Every choice we make has a cost. The cost of choosing one path is giving up all the other paths you could have taken. We try to avoid paying this price by keeping all our doors open, but in reality, trying to keep all doors open also has a price. The price is a lack of focus, a lack of mastery, and a life spent juggling too many things instead of excelling at one. This trap applies to businesses just as much as it applies to individuals. A company that tries to create products for every single type of customer will end up creating products that appeal to no one. An author who tries to write a book that will be loved by all audiences will end up writing a book that is read by none. A salesperson who tries to chase down every single possible lead will end up closing no deals because their efforts are too scattered. Focus requires sacrifice. Excellence requires closing doors. This is a hard truth to accept because it means we have to let go of potential futures. We have to mourn the lives we could have lived in order to fully live the one we have chosen. But this sacrifice is necessary for any meaningful achievement. So, what can you do to escape this trap of infinite options? The first step is a powerful but simple exercise. Take out a piece of paper and create a not to pursue list. We are all very familiar with making to-do lists, which are lists of things we want to achieve. A not to pursue list is the opposite. It is a list of things you will consciously and deliberately choose not to do. Be brutally honest with yourself. What are the careers you are no longer going to fantasize about? What are the hobbies you are going to let go of? What are the projects you are finally going to admit you will never finish? Writing these things down is an act of liberation. It clears your mind of all the what-ifs and maybes that are cluttering up your mental space. It allows you to say goodbye to the paths you will not take so you can fully commit to the path you are on. The second step is to metaphorically burn your ships. There is a famous historical story about the conqueror Hernán Cortés, who, upon arriving in the New World, ordered his men to burn their own ships. This sent a powerful message. There was no turning back. The only way to survive was to move forward and succeed in their mission. By eliminating their only escape route, they created an incredible sense of focus and commitment. You need to do the same thing in your own life. Once you have decided which doors to close, you need to make it difficult or impossible to go back. If you decide to quit a job to start your own business, do not keep your old boss's number on speed dial just in case. If you decide to commit to a serious relationship, delete the dating apps from your phone. Burning your ships on the things you have chosen not to pursue is what allows you to give 100% of your energy to your main goals. It eliminates the temptation to retreat when things get difficult. It forces you to be resourceful and dedicated. In a world that tells you that you can have it all, the secret to success and happiness is often found in choosing to have less. By consciously closing doors, you free yourself from the paralysis of too many options. You can then channel all your energy into building something truly great, one focused step at a time. 7. The how you say it trap. I want you to imagine 2 different ways you could ask your partner or roommate to do a simple chore. In the first scenario, you walk into the kitchen, see a pile of dirty dishes in the sink, and you say, "The sink is full of dishes." In the second scenario, you walk into the same kitchen, see the same pile of dishes, and you say, "It would be so great if you could do the dishes, honey." Which of these 2 sentences do you think is more likely to result in a clean sink? Of course, it is the second one. Both sentences are pointing out the same fact, that there are dirty dishes that need to be washed. But the way they are presented, or framed, is completely different. The first sentence is a blunt, factual statement that can easily sound like a complaint or an accusation. The second sentence is framed as a positive request, which is much more likely to get a positive response. This is a perfect example of a psychological trap known as framing. The framing effect is the principle that the way a message is communicated will have a massive impact on how it is received and the decision that is made based on it. The exact same information, when framed in different ways, can lead to completely different outcomes. It is not what you say, it is how you say it. Psychologists have demonstrated this effect in many clever experiments. In one famous study, researchers presented a group of people with 2 different descriptions of a piece of ground meat and asked them to judge which one was healthier. The first option was described as 99% fat-free. The second option was described as contains 1% fat. Which one do you think people chose? Overwhelmingly, people rated the 99% fat-free meat as being healthier, even though both descriptions refer to the exact same piece of meat. The positive framing of fat-free with a big, impressive number like 99 in front of it sounded much more appealing and healthy than the negative framing that focused on the small amount of fat the meat contained. The researchers then took it a step further. They asked another group to choose between meat that was 98% fat-free and meat that contains 1% fat. Logically, the meat with 1% fat is healthier than the meat that is 98% fat-free, which contains 2% fat. But again, most people chose the first option. The powerful positive frame of fat-free was more influential than the actual nutritional content. The frame beat the facts. This trap is used constantly in marketing, politics, and the media. Advertisers frame the price of a product as just 5 easy payments of $19.99 instead of saying it costs $100, because the smaller, broken down payments feel more manageable. Politicians frame a tax as a revenue enhancement to make it sound less painful than calling it a tax increase. They might call their own plan a pro-growth initiative, while calling their opponent's identical plan a risky scheme. The news media can frame the same event in very different ways. A protest can be framed as a group of concerned citizens exercising their rights, or as a mob of angry rioters causing chaos. The words they choose to frame the story will completely shape how the audience perceives the event. So, how does knowing about the framing trap help you make better decisions in your own life? The first way is by improving your own communication. When you need to communicate something important, whether it is asking for a raise, resolving a conflict with a friend, or convincing your team at work to try a new idea, you need to think carefully about your frame. Try to frame your message in a positive way, focusing on the benefits and opportunities rather than the problems and risks. Instead of telling your boss, "We will fall behind our competitors if we do not get this new software," you could say, "This new software will give us a huge advantage and help us become leaders in our industry." Both statements might be true, but the second one is much more inspiring and persuasive. The second, and perhaps more important way to use this knowledge is to protect yourself from being manipulated by the frames of others. You must realize that every single piece of information you receive, whether it is from a trusted news source, a charismatic politician, or a friendly salesperson, is subject to the framing effect. Nothing is presented in a completely neutral way. To break free from the trap, you need to practice the habit of reframing. When you hear a piece of information, consciously try to state it in a different way. If you see a product advertised as 90% of users see results, reframe it in your mind as 10% of users see no results at all. If a politician says their new policy will create 100,000 jobs, ask yourself what the potential downsides or costs are that they are not talking about. By looking at the same information from different and even opposite perspectives, you get a much more balanced and complete picture. This allows you to make a decision based on the actual facts, rather than being swayed by the cleverness of the frame. This is especially critical when making big life decisions. When you are considering a medical procedure, a doctor might frame it by saying, "This surgery has a 90% success rate." That sounds very reassuring, but you should reframe it by thinking, "This means that for 1 out of every 10 people who have this surgery, it fails." Thinking about it that way might lead you to ask more critical questions and to more carefully consider your options. The framing effect is a subtle but powerful force that shapes our perception of reality. By becoming aware of it, you can become a more persuasive communicator and a much more discerning thinker. You will learn to look behind the words to see the real substance of an issue, allowing you to make choices that are truly your own. 8. The echo chamber trap. Imagine a detective who is called to the scene of a crime. After a quick look around, he decides that the butler must be the killer. From that moment on, his entire investigation changes. He stops looking for the truth and starts looking for evidence that the butler is guilty. He interviews a witness who says they saw the butler near the library, and he thinks, "Aha, a key piece of evidence." He ignores another witness who says the butler was in the kitchen the entire night. He finds a small spot of what could be mud on the butler's shoes, and he sees it as proof that he was sneaking around outside. He completely disregards the fact that the entire garden is muddy and everyone has mud on their shoes. The detective has fallen into one of the most powerful and pervasive psychological traps of all. It is called the confirmation bias, or what we can think of as the echo chamber trap. The confirmation bias is our natural human tendency to search for, interpret, favor, and recall information in a way that confirms or supports our pre-existing beliefs or hypotheses. In simpler terms, we do not see the world as it is. We see it as we already believe it to be. Once we have an opinion, our brain goes on a mission to prove that opinion is right. It actively seeks out information that agrees with us, and just as actively, it ignores, dismisses, or reinterprets information that contradicts us. We love to be told that we are right, and our brain is wired to create a reality where that happens as often as possible. In today's world, the confirmation bias has been put on steroids by the internet and social media. The algorithms that power our news feeds, our video recommendations, and our search results are designed to do one thing. They want to keep us engaged for as long as possible. And the easiest way to do that is to show us content that we already agree with. If you believe that a certain political party is corrupt, you will be shown an endless stream of articles, videos, and posts that all say that same political party is corrupt. You will be placed inside a digital echo chamber where your own beliefs are repeated back to you over and over again. This feels very comfortable and validating. It makes us feel smart and informed. But what it is actually doing is making our beliefs more extreme and making us completely intolerant of different points of view. We start to believe that our view is not just one perspective, but the only perspective. We begin to think that anyone who disagrees with us must be either stupid, evil, or crazy. The confirmation bias is not just about politics. It affects our daily decisions in subtle but significant ways. If you think that a certain brand of car is the best, you will only pay attention to the good reviews and positive comments about that car. You will dismiss all the negative reviews as being written by picky people or competitors. If you believe a new diet is the key to weight loss, you will eagerly read success stories while ignoring the scientific studies that show it is ineffective or even harmful. The danger of this trap is that it prevents us from finding the truth. It locks us into our initial assumptions and makes it almost impossible to change our minds, even when we are presented with overwhelming evidence that we are wrong. It makes us poor decision makers because we are operating with a distorted and incomplete picture of reality. So, how can you escape from your own personal echo chamber? It is not easy because it requires fighting against the very wiring of your brain. But it is possible. The first and most crucial step is to actively and deliberately seek out disconfirming evidence. You have to become a scientist of your own beliefs. When you have a strong opinion about something, make it your mission to try and prove yourself wrong. If you are thinking about making a big investment, do not just look for all the reasons it is a great idea. Spend most of your time searching for all the reasons it could fail. If you have a strong political belief, do not just consume media from your own side. Force yourself to read articles, watch videos, and listen to podcasts from people who hold the exact opposite view. Your goal is not necessarily to change your mind, but to understand the other side's arguments in the most generous way possible. The great scientist Charles Darwin was so aware of this bias that he kept a special notebook. Whenever he came across a piece of data or an observation that contradicted his theory of evolution, he would force himself to write it down immediately. He knew that his brain would naturally try to forget or dismiss this inconvenient information, so he had to create a system to fight back against his own bias. The second strategy is to ask better questions. Instead of asking questions that are designed to confirm your beliefs, ask questions that challenge them. For example, instead of asking, "What are the benefits of this plan?" you should also ask, "What are the biggest risks of this plan?" Or, "What is the most likely way this could go wrong?" Another powerful question to ask yourself is, what would have to be true for me to change my mind on this topic? This forces you to define the conditions under which you would be willing to abandon your current belief. It moves you from a position of rigid certainty to one of intellectual openness. Finally, it is important to surround yourself with people who think differently than you do. If everyone in your social circle shares the exact same opinions, you are living in a real-life echo chamber. Make an effort to have respectful conversations with people from different backgrounds, with different experiences and different viewpoints. This can be uncomfortable, but it is one of the best ways to see the flaws in your own thinking and to gain a more complete and nuanced understanding of the world. The goal is not to be a person with no beliefs. The goal is to be a truth seeker, not a right seeker. A right seeker just wants to have their existing beliefs validated. A truth seeker is willing to follow the evidence wherever it leads, even if it leads to the uncomfortable conclusion that they were wrong. By fighting the confirmation bias, you open your mind to learning, to growth, and to a much deeper and more accurate understanding of reality. 9. The too invested to quit trap. Have you ever been at the movie theater, watching a film that you quickly realize is absolutely terrible? The acting is bad, the story makes no sense, and you are completely bored. You look at your watch and see there is still an hour and a half left to go. What do? Most people will sit there and suffer through the rest of the miserable movie. When you ask them why, they will give you a very common answer. They will say, "Well, I already paid $15 for the ticket, so I have to get my money's worth." This is a perfect example of a deeply irrational but incredibly common psychological trap. It is called the sunk cost fallacy, or what we can call the too invested to quit trap. A sunk cost is any cost, whether it is money, time, or effort, that has already been spent and cannot be recovered. The fallacy is our tendency to let these unrecoverable costs influence our current decisions. We feel that because we have already invested so much, we have to keep going, even when it is clear that continuing is a bad idea. Our brains trick us into thinking that by continuing, we can somehow justify or recover the initial investment. But the truth is, the sunk cost is gone forever. The $15 you spent on that movie ticket is gone the moment you buy it. Whether you stay for the rest of the bad movie or you walk out and do something more enjoyable with your time, that money is not coming back. The logical thing to do is to ignore the sunk cost and make your decision based only on the future. The rational question to ask is, given that the $15 is already gone, what is the best way for me to spend the next 90 minutes of my life? Should I continue to be miserable, or should I leave and do something I will actually enjoy? But our brains hate the idea of waste and loss. The thought of wasting the $15 feels so bad that we are willing to waste something even more valuable, our time, just to avoid feeling that sting of loss. This trap appears in much bigger and more serious situations than just a bad movie. It ruins businesses, destroys careers, and traps people in unhappy relationships. Think about an entrepreneur who has poured their life savings and 3 years of their life into a business that is clearly failing. Every month, it loses more money, and there are no signs of a turnaround. Logically, the best move might be to shut the business down, cut their losses, and move on to something new. But the sunk cost fallacy is whispering in their ear. You cannot quit now. Think of all the money you have already put in. Think of all those sleepless nights and all the hard work. If you quit now, it will all have been for nothing. So, they continue to pour more good money after bad, digging themselves into an even deeper hole, all because they are emotionally attached to the costs they have already sunk into the project. We see the same thing in relationships. Someone might stay in a toxic or deeply unhappy relationship for years, not because they have hope for the future, but because of the past. They think, I have already invested 5 years of my life into this person. If I leave now, those 5 years will be wasted. They are making a decision about their future happiness based entirely on a past investment of time that they can never get back. So how do you protect yourself from this powerful and irrational trap? You need to train your brain to ignore sunk costs and focus only on the future. The first technique is to use the fresh start question. When you are facing a decision about whether to continue with something, ask yourself this simple question. If I were not already involved in this project or situation, and I was starting from scratch today, would I choose to get into it? For the person watching the bad movie, the question is, knowing what I know now about this movie, would I pay $15 to come and see it? The answer is obviously no, which makes it clear that they should leave. For the struggling entrepreneur, the question is, if I had all my money back in my bank account and I was looking for a new business to start, would I choose this one? If the answer is no, it is a strong signal that it is time to move on, regardless of the sunk costs. The second technique is to seek an outside opinion. You are often too emotionally invested to see the situation clearly. The sunk costs create a powerful emotional fog. Find someone you trust who is not involved in the situation and has no emotional attachment to it. Explain the facts of the situation to them, but be careful not to mention how much you have already invested. Just describe the current situation and the future prospects. Then, ask for their advice. Because they are not influenced by the sunk costs, they can often see the logical path forward much more clearly than you can. Finally, try to reframe the act of quitting. We often see quitting as a sign of failure, but in many cases, quitting a losing endeavor is the bravest and smartest thing you can do. It is not failure, it is a strategic decision to stop wasting valuable resources, like your time, money, and energy, on something that is not working. It is an act of liberation that frees you up to invest those resources into something with a much better chance of success. The sunk cost fallacy is one of the most difficult traps to avoid because it plays on our deep fear of loss. But by learning to recognize it and by forcing yourself to make decisions based on the future, not the past, you can save yourself from countless bad decisions and free yourself to pursue a more successful and happier path. 10. The "if I can see it, it's important" trap. I am going to ask you a simple question. Which do you think is more likely to kill a person in the United States, a shark attack or falling airplane parts? Most people will immediately say a shark attack. We can all easily picture it in our minds. We have seen the scary movies, the dramatic news reports, and the terrifying images. The idea of a shark attack is vivid, emotional, and easy to recall. Now, what about falling airplane parts? Most of us have probably never even thought about it. It is a bizarre, unemotional, and almost unimaginable event. The correct answer is that you are about 30 times more likely to be killed by a piece of falling airplane debris than by a shark. The reason we get this so wrong is because of a mental shortcut our brain uses called the availability heuristic. We can call it the "if I can see it, it's important" trap. The availability heuristic is our tendency to judge the likelihood of an event based on how easily we can bring examples of it to mind. If something is recent, dramatic, shocking, or frequently shown in the media, our brain assumes that it must be very common and important. If something is boring, abstract, or statistically common but rarely reported on, our brain assumes it is rare and unimportant. Our brains are lazy. They do not like to spend energy on difficult tasks like researching statistics. It is much easier to make a quick judgment based on what is readily available in our memory. This mental shortcut worked well for our ancestors. If they saw a fellow caveman get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger near a certain watering hole, the memory of that event would be very vivid and available. This would make them correctly judge that watering hole as being very dangerous. But in our modern world, which is saturated with media, this same mental shortcut leads us to have a completely distorted view of risk. We live in a state of constant fear about the wrong things. We worry about terrorist attacks, child abductions, and plane crashes because these events are incredibly dramatic and receive massive, round-the-clock news coverage when they happen. They are highly available in our minds. However, statistically, the risk from these things is incredibly small. We ignore the much larger, more boring risks that are far more likely to harm us, like heart disease from a poor diet, car accidents from texting while driving, or household falls. These are the real dangers, but because they are common and not as sensational, they are less available in our minds, and so we underestimate their risk. This trap does not just affect our perception of risk, it affects our decisions in business and at work. Imagine you are a manager and you need to conduct annual performance reviews for 2 employees. The first employee, let's call her Susan, has been a steady, consistent performer all year long. She quietly does excellent work every single day, but she never makes a big fuss about it. The second employee, let's call him Tom, has been an average performer for most of the year, but last week, he landed a huge, spectacular deal that everyone in the company is talking about. When it comes time for the review, the availability heuristic will push you to rate Tom as the better employee. His recent dramatic success is fresh and highly available in your mind. Susan's year of quiet, consistent excellence is less available and harder to recall. As a result, you might unfairly reward the flashy performer over the steady one. Marketers also use this trap to their advantage all the time. They will run advertising campaigns that are full of emotional, vivid stories and testimonials. When you go to buy a product, these easily recalled stories will pop into your head, making you feel that the product is more effective or popular than it actually is. You are not making a decision based on data, you are making it based on the availability of the marketing message in your brain. So, how can you escape this trap and start seeing the world based on reality instead of just what is easy to remember? The first and most important solution is to learn to trust data over drama. When you are assessing a risk or making a decision, actively resist the pull of vivid anecdotes and stories. Instead, make an effort to find the actual statistics. Do not base your fear of flying on the one dramatic news report of a crash. Look up the actual safety statistics for air travel, which will show you that it is one of the safest forms of transportation in the world. Do not base your investment decisions on the one exciting story you heard about a friend who got rich quick on a single stock. Look at the long-term data on investment returns. By grounding your decisions in objective data, you can override the emotional pull of the availability heuristic. The second strategy is to work with people who have different experiences and perspectives. Your own personal experiences are highly available to you, and you can easily start to think that your experience is universal. If you have had a bad experience with a certain type of product, you might assume that the product is bad for everyone. By talking to people with different life experiences, you expose yourself to a wider range of information, which helps to balance out the availability of your own memories. Finally, when you are in a position to judge others, like in a performance review, it is critical to keep detailed records over time. Do not rely on your memory of recent events. Keep a journal or a log of an employee's performance, both the highs and the lows, throughout the entire year. This provides you with a more accurate and objective set of data to base your evaluation on, protecting you from being unfairly swayed by one recent dramatic event. The availability heuristic is a fundamental glitch in our thinking that makes us bad at assessing risk and probability. It makes us fear the wrong things and make decisions based on flashy stories instead of solid facts. By learning to recognize this bias, and by forcing yourself to look beyond what is easy to see, you can develop a much clearer and more accurate map of the world, which will lead you to make far wiser and safer choices. Thank you for watching. The human mind is a fascinating and complex thing, full of these hidden traps and biases. By understanding them, you can start to take back control from your own irrational instincts. If you learned something valuable in this video and want to continue improving your thinking, make sure to subscribe to MT for more content just like this.